Alright, good morning guys, happy Sunday. So today is part 3 of the Slutbucket, my 98 M3 convertible. So where we left off, I just got an M50 manifold, found out that was a pretty good conversion to do. So I bought a conversion kit. I got a M50manifold.com conversion kit, got the red one. So it took about a week to get that thing shipped in. So in the meantime, I was driving that Volvo XC90 that I had, which really sucked. It's not a very fun car to drive at all. And so I got that in, I did the conversion, got the manifold all back on properly, and it ran fine. It was sick. After about close to a week, the ECU really adapted to the new manifold, and it was a lot faster. It felt a lot faster, at least. I think M50 manifolds are good for about 20 horsepower, and there was a total difference in power in the top end. The car had a lot more character in the top end. So roughly 3 weeks after I finished that manifold conversion, I got my car running right, the lower hose started leaking. Freaking another coolant leak, right? So I was like, dude, send it. I'm just gonna do a full freaking cooling system rebuild because I'm done with trying to fix these coolant leaks. So I rebuilt the full cooling system. I went hard. I was like, you know, why not just replace it? Might as well upgrade it. So I got an aluminum water pump with an aluminum impeller. I got a new thermostat, an aluminum thermostat housing, new uppers, lowers. I got a new fan shroud, and I had to modify it because I bought a Z3M radiator. So the whole freaking 9 yards thing was bitching. And then it completely stopped leaking coolant. I didn't really have to worry about that anymore. So my car's running solid. I'm all happy that it's running so well. But right about that time is when I started consistently going to meets once or twice a week. And along with reading threads about E36 M3s, I sort of figured out pretty quickly that I bought the wrong one. Mainly because I bought an automatic. Now after reading all these stories about how great these cars are with a stick shift, I sort of felt left out in a sense. I wasn't getting as much as I could have from the car. And so I kind of got a little bit sad and a little bit depressed, and I started to kind of not like the car, not so much, but start regretting buying it, you know what I mean? And so it was just this really big struggle because I just finally got the car running properly. No mechanical issues with it now, but it's automatic, you know what I mean? And so I sort of had this internal debate, do I sell it or do I just sort of lie to myself and enjoy the automatic? Because the truth was, it's, you know, you're missing out. And I knew that. And I knew I was missing out by driving the automatic. And so I sort of wanted to tell myself that everything is fine when in reality it wasn't, because it was automatic. So I started looking into what I can do, you know, can I sell the car or do a manual swap? So I started looking into the manual swap, and it was fairly expensive. Close to $2 grand, a little over $1 grand in parts, and making $150 a paycheck, that was going to take me a while to save up. So I sort of came up with a plan for myself. So I put the car up for sale for about a little over $1,000 more than I paid for it. So I think I put it up for sale for $6,000. And meanwhile, while it was selling, I was saving money for a manual conversion. Alright, if I get enough money to do the manual conversion, I'll do the manual conversion. If the car sells, I'll just use whatever money I have saved up for the manual swap on top of the money I sold the car for, and actually buy a manual E36. And so the car just sort of sat on the market for maybe 6 or 7 months, and I don't blame you, nobody wants an automatic E36 M3, let alone an automatic convertible E36. And so I saved up enough to do the manual swap, and I knew if I was going to keep the car, I wanted to do the manual swap right. So I bought a bunch of upgraded stuff for the swap, aside from just the basic stuff. I got a lightweight flywheel, a brand new M3 clutch, a refurbished transmission, as many parts as I could new, basically. New master, new slave, new clutch lines, stainless steel lines, a short shift kit, a DSSR rod, all that good stuff. And so I took my car off the market because I knew nobody wanted it. So I get all my parts, I start figuring out what tools I need, the whole approach to do this manual swap, a good plan of attack. And keep in mind, this was my first real big job on a car, so I've never really, besides the valve cover and the manifold and the cooling system, this was going to be the first major job I've ever done. So over winter break of school, I managed to score a whole weekend off of work, so Saturday, Sunday, and then I traded shifts for next week with one of my homies, and then got Monday off too, so I had a window of 3 days. So I was like, oh perfect, that should be enough. So I pull the car in, get it up, start ripping the freaking thing apart, and I'm figuring it out as I go. I've read a lot of stuff, I did a lot of research, but I've never actually pulled the transmission before, so kind of a free-for-all. The whole swap actually went pretty smoothly, aside from me stripping one of the lower transmission bolts. Because I used General 12-point and not eTorque 6-point, I managed to strip one. So that was a little bit of a hang-up. I had to freaking grind it off with a grinder because I just rounded the hell out of it. And then the rest of the swap went pretty smoothly. Freaking all day though. At 6 in the morning, and it didn't stop until 9 o'clock at night. Took a shower, went to bed, woke up at 6, had some coffee, start all over again. And so I did manage to pull it off in 3 days. The only help that I had was one of my friends came over and he helped me lift the transmission up into the car. But beside that, it was all me. And it was a lot of fun. I had a blast. Despite it being an assload of work, it was really fun. Now I finally get the car up and running properly. Car runs, transmission shifting fine, the clutches feels fine, but I had a problem. I finished the car on Monday night at like 9:30, 10 o'clock, and I had to be at work at 6 o'clock the next morning. And I had never driven stick before in my life. Never. And so that was some shit. And it sucked because it was a brand new clutch, and I knew I had to break it in properly. You know, you gotta be smooth with it, and you gotta be gentle, treat it nicely. But never having driven stick before, it's like, fuck. So not only do I have to be nice to it, I have to learn how to drive stick while being nice to it. And so that really sucked. I never stalled it. I just got into some really ugly situations with it where like I couldn't find the balance right, so I would just sit there and lug the engine and not go anywhere. Not to mention down here in Southern California, it's a pretty hilly place. So that was some quality shit. The first thing I learned how to do was to freaking use the e-brake to get going on a hill start. That was sketchy. But I sort of figured out how to drive stick because I knew how all the parts worked and how the whole system was supposed to work. So it sort of taught me how I needed to drive stick. I just needed to figure it out and learn the muscle memory behind it. And once I figured it out and started getting smooth at it and butter at it, so freaking good. That was like the best feeling for me, being able to drive stick just fluently. And for like the first 2 weeks I was driving around without a center console on because, well, I got the car drivable, but I didn't finish up the swap all the way. And so I go to start putting the center console back on, I get it all nice and tidy, and I figured out I had a problem pretty quickly because my neutral was sitting where first, third, and fifth, like the gates would be, and then my first was way up in the center console, and then like my second and fourth were where neutral should have been. So I'm like, alright, what the fuck? So I start looking into it, think I might have gotten the wrong shifter, all this sort of stuff, and I had issues driving it because if I had it in first or third gear, it would literally pop out of gear. So I'm like, what the hell? So I got in there and figured out I put the shifter on backwards. So the shifter has a little bit of a bend to it, and that bend is supposed to go towards the back of the car. I had it facing forward. So with the center console off, because it doesn't have a little gate, it doesn't matter. But when you have the center console on, it does matter. So I got that all figured out, flipped it around, freaking prime. And that car totally changed. The dynamic of how it drives, just the presence of it, the feel to it, completely different. I was starting to understand what everyone was talking about when getting these things manual is the way to go, and it's, oh, it totally is. They're totally different cars. So I started looking into other shifting techniques, learning how to downshift, start learning how to rev match. And right as I started learning how to downshift and rev match, my brakes started to get some fade in it, disc thickness variation. And so every time I would step on the pedal, the freaking wheel would just shimmy hard as hell. So I was like, oh great, that's not good. And so I was still kind of in a little bit of a financial hole from that manual swap. It took a lot more money than I thought it was going to. So I didn't really have any money to fix the brakes. Like for a couple weeks, my version of slowing down was downshifting until like first gear, and then I would use the brakes, because pushing the pedal down at like 40 miles an hour, the thing would just freaking shake like hell, and it was super sketchy. So I got a full new set of rotors, front and rear. I got new pads all the way around, and then the car was almost perfect. And I started to fall in love with that thing again. Having the car set up like that, oh, it was so good. It was just delicious. And it was like a completely different car than the day I bought it. Driving it every day, it was like driving it the first week I had it, you know, that good feeling. Oh, it's just so good. That's sort of the thing I like about modifying cars, you know, you can have a car, and when you first get it, you're like totally in love with it, you know, and after a while, you sort of get used to how it drives, used to how it performs, used to how it looks, just how the car feels, and then you throw on a modification or two, then it's a whole new car again, and it's just, you fall in love with it over and over again. So every single time you modify it, you just re-fall in love with the car. Just like my sedan right here. Like, I've had this thing for several months, and this is like the third week I've had it since the manual swap, and it's just, I'm in love with this car all over again. It's beautiful. It's a magical thing, boys. Alright, that is it for part 3 of the Slutbucket. I will see you guys next Sunday. Thank you guys so much for watching. Keep it fresh, and I will see you guys later.